Late one night, a German shepherd suddenly appeared outside the home of a fallen army officer's widow. But the real shock came moments later when the dog gave birth to several strange puppies right on her doorstep. At first, the widow thought they were ordinary newborn pups. But when she leaned closer, she noticed something so disturbing her entire body froze. Fear, confusion, shock. That night turned into a nightmare she could never forget. Terrified, she immediately called the police. And when officers arrived, they uncovered something so unbelievable it stunned not only the widow but the entire town. What was hidden inside those puppies? Why did the dog come to her house out of all places? And what terrifying truth was buried behind this mysterious birth? To find out, watch this video until the very end. If you enjoy the story, make sure to hit the like button. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Alright, let's begin. 3 years after losing her husband in a military operation overseas, Emily Carter lived in a small worn-down house on the outskirts of Willow Ridge, Colorado. Life had not been kind to her. Her husband's military insurance barely covered half of the debt he had left behind, loans he took to build their dream cabin, a cabin they never got to finish. Every month, the late payment notices piled up like ghosts on her kitchen table. She worked double shifts at a diner, often returning home long after midnight to a silent house that still held her husband's photographs, his boots by the door, and a folded flag on the mantel. On a stormy November night, the kind where the sky cracked open with thunder and icy rain hit the windows like bullets, Emily was tightening the last latch on the barn when she heard it, an echoing bark slicing through the wind. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. That voice, that sound, she'd heard it 1,000 times. "Ranger," she whispered. Through the sheets of rain, a large shadow limped into view. A German shepherd, mud-soaked, ribs showing, trembling. And when the lightning flashed again, Emily's knees buckled. The scar over the left eye, the collar with the faded military tag. It was Ranger, her husband's military K9 partner, the dog that vanished during the ambush that supposedly killed her husband. Ranger staggered forward and collapsed at her feet. Emily dropped to her knees, cradling him, tears mixing with the rain. But before she could pull him inside, Ranger shifted. He wasn't alone. Under his belly, Emily found movement, tiny bodies, whimpering, newborns, 5 of them. But these weren't normal puppies. Their fur had strange markings, their eyes opened too early, their tiny bodies unusually warm. Emily rushed them all inside, dried them, and wrapped them in blankets. But when she felt the back of one puppy's neck, she froze. A bump under the skin. Not the roundness of a microchip, but a sharp, foreign shape. Her hands trembled as she took a small flashlight and gently parted the fur. A metallic edge glinted. A chip, but not a pet chip. A data drive. Her heart slammed. One puppy after another, each had the same thing. "What did you bring to me, boy?" she whispered to Ranger. The shepherd looked up with exhausted eyes, as if he understood every word. Outside, thunder shook the house again. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something worse than grief. She felt fear. GOPRDBTYA. Emily didn't sleep the entire night. She sat at her dining table with the puppies bundled in towels and Ranger resting his head on her lap. She kept checking the strange chips with her fingers, unable to believe what she was feeling. They were too perfectly shaped, too intentionally placed. Someone had put them there. Someone dangerous. By dawn, the storm cleared. leaving the world soaked and eerily quiet. Emily's hands shook as she picked up her phone. There was one person she trusted enough to call Detective Mark Holloway, her husband's best friend, the man who held her hand at the funeral, the man who checked on her every Christmas. He was family. "Mark, can you come over? Please. It's urgent." His voice was calm, steady. "I'll be there in 20. She hung up and looked at Ranger. Something in the dog's expression unsettled her. He kept pacing between the door and the hall, tail stiff, ears alert. Not like he was expecting help, more like he was bracing for danger. A car pulled up outside. Emily opened the door immediately. Mark was already stepping out, a warm smile on his face, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He walked inside slowly, scanning the room, scanning the floor, scanning the puppies. His jaw tightened. Well, you finally found them," he murmured. The words hit Emily like ice. "What are you talking about?" Mark closed the door behind him, clicked the lock. Ranger growled. Mark pulled out a gun. "You have no idea what those puppies are worth," he said softly, stepping closer. "Your husband stumbled onto something he shouldn't have. He found my operation, and when he tried to expose me, I had to take him out." Emily felt the world tilt. "Take him out? What are you saying?" Mark chuckled. "Come on, Emily, you're smart. Those chips contain the names, locations, and payment routes of every smuggling client in 4 states. I needed them back. That dog was trained to retrieve. I just had to wait." The room spun, her throat closed, her husband killed by the one man he trusted most. Mark cocked the gun. "Now hand over the dogs." Ranger lunged, Mark fired. Emily screamed as Ranger yelped, skidding across the floor. The puppies cried. Emily threw herself over them, shaking. Mark aimed at her next. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for this moment." GLPRTTYA, sheesh. Emily braced for the shot, but instead of a gunshot, a voice echoed from the shadows near the back hallway. 3 years, Mark. 3 years of waiting and hunting. Emily froze. Ranger slowly lifted his head. Mark spun, gun raised. A figure stepped out from the darkness. Boots. A familiar stance. A scar on the left jaw. Shoulders she had cried into. Eyes she had memorized. Her husband. Michael Carter. Alive. Emily gasped louder than her own heartbeat. Her legs gave out. Michael? He stepped closer, wearing the same tactical vest he disappeared in 3 years ago, only older, worn and hardened by survival. "Mark didn't kill me," Michael said. "He tried. But Ranger dragged me out before the explosion. I figured out the truth, that Mark was the leak, the trafficker, the traitor." Mark snarled. "You were supposed to stay dead." Michael smirked. "Yeah, that is what you counted on. So I played along, went underground, spent 2 years infiltrating your entire network." His voice sharpened. "And I used Ranger the way you trained him, sent him home when the evidence was collected." Emily finally found her voice. "You sent Ranger back to me?" Michael's eyes softened. "I never stopped trying to get back to you." Mark roared with rage and fired. But Michael was faster, grabbing Emily and pulling her to the floor as bullets tore into the wall. Ranger sprang forward, wounded but fearless, slamming into Mark's legs and knocking him backward. The gun skidded across the floor. Mark scrambled up, grabbing a kitchen knife instead, charging toward Emily. Michael intercepted him, fists flying, years of betrayal burning in every strike. The 2 men crashed into furniture, slammed against walls, each blow echoing through the house. Ranger, despite bleeding, stood between Emily and danger, teeth bared, waiting for the next move. Mark grabbed Michael by the throat, slamming him onto the table. You should be stay dead. Emily's eyes landed on the fallen gun. She dove for it. GLPR, CTR, flash. Emily grabbed the gun, turned, and pointed it at Mark with both trembling hands. Get away from him. Mark froze for a second, then laughed. You? You don't have the nerve. You don't know what I've lived through, Emily whispered, voice shaking but steady enough. You took my husband, my peace, my life. You chased me like prey. You don't get to take anything else. Mark lunged. Emily fired. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him backward. Michael pushed himself up, delivering a final hard blow that sent Mark crashing into the floor. Ranger barked, baring his teeth, making sure the man stayed down. Sirens erupted outside Michael's backup team, finally arriving after receiving his encoded distress signal hours earlier. Officers stormed inside, cuffing Mark as he glared up at the trio he had underestimated. Michael slid down beside Emily, touching her face with shaking fingers. I am here. I swear, I am here for good this time. Emily broke into sobs, burying herself against him. She felt the warmth of his arms, the truth of his heartbeat, the reality she had wanted to believe for 3 long years. Ranger nudged them both, whining softly. Emily pulled the dog into her embrace too. You brought him home, she whispered into his fur. You saved us again. The puppies, still bundled in blankets, squirmed and squeaked. Michael lifted one carefully. These little guys, they were going to blow apart the biggest trafficking case in the country. Emily smiled through tears. And they were born here, in our home. Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Then this right here is where our new life starts. The morning sun broke through the clouds, shining across the wrecked living room, illuminating a family reunited not by fate, but by love, loyalty, and a German shepherd who never forgot his mission. Emily leaned her head against Michael's chest, Ranger resting beside them like a guardian reborn, and for the first time in years, her heart felt whole again. The storm finally died sometime before dawn, but the house still shook in Emily's chest. She hadn't slept. She couldn't eat. The kitchen table was a mess, coffee rings, crumpled bills, a flashlight, an old first aid kit half opened. On the floor beside her chair lay Ranger, wrapped in towels, his breathing slow and heavy. In a laundry basket lined with blankets slept the 5 newborn puppies, huddled together like tiny beating hearts, each one carrying something inside its neck that no puppy should have. Emily sat there in her oversized flannel shirt, fingers laced together so tightly they hurt. Every few minutes, she reached down to rest a hand on Ranger's head, needing to feel that he was real and not some cruel dream. Where have you been all this time, boy? She whispered. Ranger's ears twitched, but he didn't move. His fur was still damp in places, his paws cracked from running over rough ground. He had the look of something that had survived hell and walked back out of it. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. The bumps at the back of each puppy's neck, the faint metallic glint under the skin when she'd shone the flashlight. Not round like the microchips she'd seen at the vet. Sharper, longer, deliberate. Someone didn't just lose these puppies. Someone hid something inside them. Emily stood up and paced the kitchen, running her hands through her hair. Her eyes landed on the stack of unpaid utility and mortgage notices pinned to the fridge door. Final notice. Disconnection warning. Foreclosure. 3 years ago, her worst fear was losing the house. Now her worst fear was that someone might come to that house looking for whatever those puppies carried. She grabbed her phone from the counter, stared at the screen for a long second, then scrolled to a familiar name, Detective Mark Holloway. He'd been there on the worst day of her life, standing in his dark suit beside the flag-draped coffin, offering her a steady arm when her knees gave out. He'd driven her home when everyone left. He'd checked on her after the funeral, brought groceries during the hardest winter, fixed her porch steps when they'd rotted through. If there was anybody left in the world she trusted with something this insane, it was Mark. She pressed call. The phone barely rang once. "Emily?" Mark's voice came in, low and rough with sleep. "It's early. Everything okay?" "No." Her voice broke. She turned away from the puppies, as if they could hear her. I need you to come over. It's important, and you can tell anyone you were coming." There was a brief pause on the line. She could almost hear him waking up, shifting into his detective mode. "You're scaring me. Did someone show up at a house?" "Not someone," she said quietly. "Something." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, controlled. "All right, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don T opened the door for anyone else. Lock everything." "Oh, okay. And Emily?" "Yeah? Stay away from the windows," he said. "Just in case." The line went dead. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold kitchen air. She slid her phone into her pocket and checked the front door, then the back, locking each one and drawing the curtains. The house felt too small, too exposed, like it had suddenly been lifted onto a stage with spotlights aimed at it. In the living room, the old clock above the TV ticked loudly. 6:12 a.m. The first faint grey light of morning leaked through the edges of the curtains, turning the storm-beaten world outside into a watercolor blur. Emily knelt beside the laundry basket, gently touching each puppy's tiny head. "I am going to fix this," she whispered. "Whatever this is." One of the puppies yawned, showing off a pink tongue, then wriggled deeper against its siblings. A sound between a whine and a sigh rose from the group. Ranger stirred. His eyes opened, cloudy but alert. He lifted his head and looked straight at the front door, ears pricking. "You hear him already?" she asked softly. "You remember Mark, Don to you?" Ranger didn't wag his tail, didn't move closer. His gaze stayed locked on the door, his body tense. A low, rumbling growl vibrated deep in his chest. Emily frowned. "Hey, it's okay." "It's Mark." The growl deepened. She had never seen him react like that to anyone he knew, especially not someone who used to bring him treats at the station, someone who had been her husband's best friend since boot camp. Maybe he was just on edge from the storm, from being out there alone, who knows where. Headlights swept briefly across the living room wall. A car. Then the crunch of tires on wet gravel. Emily's heart picked up speed. She gave Ranger one last rub and stood. "Stay here," she whispered instinctively, as if he understood every word. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her shirt and forced herself toward the front door. When she opened it, cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. Mark stood on the porch, one hand in the pocket of his jacket, the other running through his damp hair. He wore jeans and a grey t-shirt. Under a leather jacket, his detective badge clipped at his belt, visible but not flashy. He gave her a quick, familiar half smile. "You look like you've been up all night." "I have," she said. "Come in." He stepped over the threshold, his boots leaving faint muddy prints on the hardwood floor. As he entered, his eyes moved fast. Living room, window, hallway, kitchen. Not just taking in the house, but assessing it, measuring it. Typical Mark, she told herself. He is a cop. That is how they are. Then his gaze found Ranger. "Holy," He stopped dead. For a few seconds he didn't move, his face frozen somewhere between disbelief and awe. "Is that Ranger?" Emily said softly. "He came back last night." Ranger's growl returned, low but steady. His lips curled slightly, teeth flashing. "Easy boy," Mark said, taking a careful step forward, palms open. "It's a me, remember? I used to sneak you jerky in the locker room." Ranger didn't relax. If anything, his muscles tightened. Emily stepped between them without thinking. "He has been through a lot. Just give him time." "Yeah," Mark murmured. "Sure." His eyes drifted past Ranger to the laundry basket on the floor. He tilted his head slightly. "And what do we have here?" Emily swallowed. "That's why I called you." She led him into the kitchen. The puppies were still sleeping, bundled in the blanket like tiny warm stones. Mark crouched beside the basket, every line of his body suddenly very still. "How many?" he asked. "5. He nodded once, slowly. "And you found something?" She hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her not to say anything more. But this was Mark, the only person who had stayed when everyone else moved on with their lives. She pointed to the back of one puppy's neck. "There is something under the skin. Not like the usual chip, bigger, straighter. I saw metal when I moved the fur. May I?" His voice was gentle, almost tender. Emily watched as he reached down and carefully parted the fur, pressing lightly with his thumb. The puppy shivered but didn't awake. A tiny silver edge flashed at the surface. Mark's face changed. It was subtle, his jaw setting, his eyes going colder. Something like calculation flickering behind his pupils. But it was like watching a mask slide into place. Emily's stomach knotted. "You know what that is done to you?" Mark straightened slowly. For a brief second, he didn't answer. Then he turned his back to her, looking around the kitchen. His gaze landed on the windows, the curtains, the back door, the hallway. When he finally spoke, his tone was almost too calm. "Close the blinds in the living room," he said. "If anyone else watching the house from the road, I don't want them to see we're awake." Emily's mouth went dry. "Do you think someone is watching?" Mark turned to face her, the warm friend she knew gone from his eyes, replaced by a man who'd seen too much of the world's darkness. "Emily, I'm going to need you to answer me honestly. When Ranger showed up, did anyone else see him? Any neighbors? Anyone driving by?" I don't think so. It was raining so hard I could barely see the front steps, and you haven't called anyone else? No vet, no shelter, no curious friend who likes to gossip?" She shook her head, feeling smaller with every question. "Just you." "Good," he said quickly. "That is good." He walked to the front door and turned the deadbolt with a deafening click. Then he locked the chain. Something inside her flinched. "Mark," she said quietly, watching the way his jaw clenched. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if making a decision he did not want to make. He turned back toward her, and his eyes weren't familiar anymore. They weren't soft. They weren't kind. They were cold. "For 3 years," he said, each word careful, almost rehearsed, "I've been waiting for that dog to walk back into someone's life." Her heart skipped a beat. "What? You think it was just random?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "That he disappeared during that ambush? That your husband died in an explosion and Ranger just vanished?" "Stop," she whispered, feeling her chest tighten. "Don't talk about Michael like that." Mark's mouth twisted. "Michael was a good soldier, a better man than I deserved as a friend. But he stuck his nose where it didn't belong. He found files, names, routes, He started asking questions about shipments that weren't in the system. He noticed that some raids never happened, that some targets were always one step ahead. Emily stared at him, the room spinning. Shipments? What are you talking about? Human cargo, weapons, drugs, Mark said flatly. Stuff that moved faster than the law, stuff people pay millions for. He nodded toward the Puppies. And now, information. She instinctively stepped between him and the basket. You are scaring me. You should be scared, he said. Those chips in their necks, they are not pet IDs. They re-encrypted data drives, lists of clients, payment transfers, offshore accounts, insurance. Insurance for who? She asked, though she already felt the answer like ice in her blood. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. For me. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Emily took a step back. Ranger, still by the table, lifted his head and growled, deep and thunderous. Mark moved his jacket aside. There was a gun at his hip. She'd seen that gun 100 times. It had never bothered her. Until now. Slowly, deliberately, he wrapped his fingers around the grip and drew it out, the black metal catching the dim kitchen light. He held it low but steady, angled toward the floor between them. Mark, she whispered, voice cracking. You're joking. Tell me you were joking. This is some kind of messed up test, right? You always did see the best in people, he said softly. It is one of the things I liked about you. One of the reasons I knew I could keep tabs on you without you ever suspecting a thing. Tabs on me. She felt dizzy. You've been watching me? For 3 years, he replied, waiting, hoping that dog would come back, just like he was trained to do. Retrieve and return. He nodded at Ranger. Good boy, by the way. Took him longer than I'd hoped, but he got the job done. Emily's vision blurred with tears. Everything she thought she knew about the last 3 years, the late-night calls, the random check-ins, the unexpected visits twisted into something ugly. You. Her throat closed around the words. You used me? No, Mark said. I used your house. You were just a grieving widow in the perfect location. Who would suspect you? Ranger pushed himself to his feet, pain showing in every movement. He stood between Emily and Mark, hackles raised, teeth bared. A dull, guttural growl ripped from his chest. Mark raised the gun slightly. Stand down, dog. Ranger didn't move. Emily could feel her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. What are you going to do? Mark's gaze flicked to the Puppies, then back to her. I am going to take what is mine. Those chips belong to me, my network, my business, and I can have you, or anyone else, telling stories about data drives in puppy necks. You kill me, she whispered, barely able to breathe. He sighed, almost tired. I don't enjoy it, but you've seen too much. And when they find you, a widow who couldn't pay her bills, who cracked under the pressure and did something terrible to herself, well, people will nod, say, we saw it, coming, and move on with their lives. He took another step forward. Ranger lunged. The gunshot shattered the morning. The sound slammed into Emily's brain, dragging a scream out of her that didn't sound human. Ranger's body jerked mid-air, then slammed into the floor, sliding against the cabinets. Ranger, she screamed. The Puppies erupted in panicked squeals. Emily dropped to her knees beside the dog, her hands shaking, eyes wild. Blood. Too much blood. Ranger tried to stand, legs slipping. He still positioned himself between her and Mark, even as his body trembled. A deep, broken growl rattled in his chest. Mark adjusted his grip on the gun, breathing hard. Stay down, Emily. Don't make this worse. She looked up at him through tears, her voice raw. You already did. He aimed the gun at her now, the barrel leveling with her chest. His face was set, no hesitation, no remorse. Goodbye, Emily, he said quietly. The world narrowed to the circle of black staring at her. She braced for the second shot, and from the dark hallway behind Mark, a low, familiar voice cut through the air like a blade. Drop the gun, Mark. Emily's heart stopped. She knew that voice. It was the one she'd heard in her dreams every night for 3 years. The voice of a man who was supposed to be dead. Mark's body jerked at the sound of that voice, sharp, low, and unmistakably alive. For a moment, the house felt airless, the silence so tight it almost rang. Rain dripped from the porch roof, outside, each tap like a countdown. Emily barely dared to breathe. Mark slowly turned his head toward the hallway, gun still raised, but his hands for the first time trembled. Impossible, he whispered. You were dead. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Boots first, combat worn, the leather cracked and burned along the sides, then the dark tactical pants, stained, faded, then the vest, not the one issued on duty, but one modified, patched several times over, hand-stitched in places, and then the face, thin, scarred, bruised in an old, healed way, eyes darker than she remembered, older than she remembered, but still, unmistakably, undeniably alive. Michael Carter. Emily grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from collapsing. The world blurred, then snapped into focus around him. Her heart hammered so hard she couldn't tell if she was breathing or drowning. He was alive. He had been alive all this time. Mark stumbled back a step. How the hell did you survive that blast? Michael didn't blink. Ranger dragged me out before the second charge went off. You planned that well, 2 bombs, not one. One to make it look like an ambush, the second to make sure the evidence vanished. Emily's eyes flooded again, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Michael, oh my God. But Michael held up one hand without looking at her, soft but commanding, as if telling her, just one more second. Let me finish this. Mark's jaw clenched. You let everyone think you were dead. You let her grieve you. For 3 years, Michael. And you let her think her husband died a hero, Michael said, voice like sharpened ice. When the truth is, he died because his best friend betrayed him. Emily gasped softly. Mark's eyes flicked to her, a flash of annoyance crossing his face, like her being awake, alive, and witnessing this was irritating rather than tragic. Michael continued, stepping forward. I found your ledger inside the ruins. The chip Ranger was carrying even then. Your supply routes, your contacts, the names, everything. You had been using your badge to protect a trafficking empire. Mark lifted the gun fully again. You should have stayed gone. The world already buried you. Good, Michael said. Made my work easier. Emily's breath hitched. Work? What work? Michael didn't look at her yet. His eyes stayed pinned to Mark. For 2 years, I infiltrated every layer of his network, he said. Built a trail, gathered evidence, learned his codes, learned what he fears, learned what drives him. Mark spat on the floor. You think any of that matters? You've got nothing, no badges, no backup, no identity. You were a ghost. That's exactly what made it easy, Michael said calmly. Ghosts slip through locked doors. Mark's face twisted with rage. You used her house as a trap. You sent that dog back here. You put her in danger. Michael's eyes finally flicked to Emily, just for a heartbeat, but the expression in them was enough to make her knees go weak. A pain, a regret, a pleading all tangled together. I knew Ranger would protect her with his life, Michael said, and I knew you would come for the drives. Mark laughed bitterly. And you think you're the hero in this? She cried for you, died inside every day, waiting. Do you know how many times I had to comfort her because of you? That made something break inside Michael's expression. His voice dropped to a soft, lethal whisper. Don't talk about her. Mark shifted his stance, raising the gun toward Michael now. Then give me the chips, or everyone in this room dies. Ranger staggered up again, despite the wound, dragging himself between Emily and danger. Blood soaked into the towels wrapped around him, but he didn't care. He stood, front legs braced, growling through clenched teeth. Emily reached for him, sobbing. Stay down, Ranger. Please. But Ranger didn't listen. He wasn't trained for surrender. Mark stepped forward, eyes burning. Move, dog. I want to warn you again. Michael spoke before Emily could. You want to touch him. Mark snapped. You think you can stop me? I already did, Michael said. For a split second, Mark looked confused. Then the clicking sound. Outside the house, boots, many boots moving across gravel. Mark's eyes widened. You called backup. Michael tilted his head slightly. 3 hours ago. Ranger was trained to send an encoded ping when he returned home. When he didn't come back after the deadline, I knew you were already here. Mark's face twisted with fury, realization, slamming into him too late. A flash of red-blue lights spilled through the cracks of the drawn curtains. Police! A voice shouted from outside. Step out with your hands up. Mark panicked. He grabbed Emily by the wrist and yanked her toward him, pressing the gun to her temple. She cried out, trying to claw free, but his grip was iron. Call them off, Mark screamed, or I'll kill her, I swear. Before he could finish, Ranger lunged, not with strength, but with the last desperate burst of loyalty he had left. His jaws clamped onto Mark's arm. Mark yelled, spinning, trying to shake the dog free. Michael charged. A wall of movement. A crash of bodies. Emily was thrown to the floor, sliding across the hardwood as Mark and Ranger tangled violently. Michael slammed into Mark from behind, knocking the gun skittering across the kitchen tiles. They struggled. Fists, elbows, pain. 3 years of betrayal exploding into one brutal fight. Cabinets shattered. Plates crashed. The puppies wailed. Ranger, bleeding heavily now, refused to let go of Mark's arm. Mark lashed out with a feral roar, elbowing Ranger in the ribs, kicking him away. The dog's body hit the side of the table with a sickening thud. Emily screamed. Michael's eyes went dark with fury. You don't touch my family. His punch years of pain, rage, and loss behind it sent Mark crashing into the counter. The detective staggered, blood trickling from his lip, breathing fast and uneven. He lunged again, this time with a knife he pulled from his jacket. Emily froze. Michael didn't. He caught Mark's wrist mid-swing, twisted hard, and slammed him onto the floor. The knife clattered away. Michael pinned him easily, the way only someone who'd been waiting 3 years for this moment could. Yuri done, Michael whispered. Emily stared at her husband. Her real husband, the man she thought she'd lost forever. He was bruised, bleeding, trembling but alive, breathing, fighting for her. Boots rushed inside as officers flooded the house. 2 handcuffs clicked closed around Mark's wrists. Mark's voice broke into a hoarse scream. I built everything. You can take this from me. You hear me, Michael? You can't. But his voice was lost under the weight of 4 officers dragging him out the door. The moment he was gone, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Emily stood trembling in the middle of her wrecked kitchen, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. Michael finally turned toward her, chest rising and falling rapidly, his eyes softening in a way she hadn't seen in years. "Em," he whispered. She covered her mouth with both hands. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if afraid she would disappear. But Emily didn't vanish. She ran straight into his arms. He lifted her against him, holding her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat pounding. She sobbed into his chest, 3 years of grief poured out in a single moment of impossible relief. Michael held her the way he used to, one hand in her hair, the other around her back, anchoring her to him. "I am here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I am here. I never wanted to leave you. I swear to God, Emily, I was coming home. I just needed to finish this." She couldn't speak. She clutched his shirt like she'd drowned without it. Then she felt a weak nudge at her leg. "Ranger." He collapsed beside them, exhausted, bleeding, but still watching them protectively. Emily fell to her knees, gathering his head into her lap, crying harder. "You brave, brave boy, you brought him home." Michael knelt beside her, placing one hand on Ranger's side. His voice cracked. He never gave up, not once. The sun, rising slow and uncertain, spilled gold over the broken kitchen. A family shattered, scarred, but finally whole again, knelt together on the floor. And for the first time in 3 years, Emily felt the world settle back into place. Morning settled over the wrecked house in a soft, trembling hush. The chaos, the gunshots, the screams, the fight felt like it had happened in another world. But the wounds, the broken cabinets, the splintered table, the blood on the floor, those remained. And the Ranger lay in the center of it all, barely breathing. Emily knelt beside him on the kitchen tiles, her hand on his chest, feeling each fragile rise and fall. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Please, boy, don't leave me again." "Not today." Michael crouched on the other side, pressing a towel against Ranger's wound, his hand steady but his jaw tight. "He is tough," he murmured, though his voice shook. "Tougher than me. He's not giving up now." Emily looked up at him, her husband, alive, wounded, exhausted, covered in dust and blood, yet somehow more real than any moment she'd lived in the last 3 years. "Don't you dare disappear again," she choked out. Michael leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "Never. Not for anything." But Ranger's whine pulled them both back. His eyes fluttered, then closed. Panic surged through Emily like fire. Michael grabbed his phone instantly. "Dr. Harris," he said sharply the moment the vet answered. "Emergency. Gunshot wound. Shepherd. My address. 2 minutes." He didn't ask. He ordered. Within minutes, the rumble of an old pickup truck sounded outside. Dr. Harris, still in pajama pants under his coat, rushed in with a portable medical kit. He dropped to his knees, examined Ranger quickly and exhaled through his teeth. "Bullet grazed the rib," he said. "He lost blood, but it missed anything vital. We get him stitched, warmed, hydrated. He has a real shot." Emily broke into sobs of relief. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, whispering, "Good boy, good boy." As the vet worked, Emily held Ranger's head in her lap, whispering through her tears, "You saved us. You saved everything." When the stitching was done and Ranger was sedated for rest, Dr. Harris looked around the house at the smashed furniture, the overturned chairs, the broken dishes, and then at Michael's face. "You two want to tell me what happened here?" he asked. Michael simply replied, "Justice." The vet nodded slowly, as if that was the only explanation needed. Soon after, the flashing lights faded. Officers left. Neighbors stayed behind their curtains, whispering about the commotion. Inside, the house returned to silence again. For the first time since the storm broke, Emily and Michael finally sat down together on the floor beside Ranger, leaning back against the torn cabinet. Their breaths felt heavy, their bones felt older, their hearts felt raw. Emily turned to him, searching his face. 3 years you were gone. Why didn't you send word? Why didn't you let me know you were alive? Michael stared at his hands scarred, calloused, stiff. If Mark had even suspected I survived, he would have come for you. He would have used you to pull me out of hiding. I couldn't have risked that. He paused, voice breaking. Every day I wanted to call you, to hear your voice. But the only thing that kept me alive was knowing that staying away was keeping you safe. Emily wiped her eyes. You thought disappearing would protect me, but you were all I had. Michael swallowed hard. I know, and I'm sorry. More than anything I've ever been sorry for. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. You came home, Michael. That's what matters now. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. I am never leaving again. Outside, sunlight poured through the tree branches, casting warm gold through the cracked window. Dust floated like tiny stars in the beams. The puppies whimpered softly from the laundry basket, waking from their sleep, blindly searching for warmth. Emily smiled through her tears. What happens now? Michael exhaled, leaning his head back. Now? The FBI takes down the entire network. Every name in those data chips. Mark S. empire falls apart today. He looked at her with softened eyes. But for us, we start over. Together, she whispered. Together, he said firmly. For good this time. They stood up slowly, their bodies stiff from the long night. Emily carried the basket of puppies to the living room where the sunlight was warmer. Michael followed, with Ranger cradled gently in his arms, the dog sleeping deeper now, his body finally able to rest. Michael laid him on a blanket near the fireplace and knelt beside him. Emily knelt too. Ranger S, breathing steadied, soft, slow, safe. Emily touched Michael S' hand. Michael laced his fingers through hers. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the last traces of the storm away. The house smelled of dust, rain, and morning light. It felt like a beginning. Emily looked at her husband, the man she thought she'd buried. Michael looked at his wife, the woman who kept his memory alive. Ranger slept between them, the bridge that brought them back together. And as the puppies squirmed and squeaked, the sun climbing higher, Emily finally whispered the words she'd held in her heart for 3 long years. Welcome home. Michael leaned into her, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I never stopped coming back to you. The world outside moved on, unaware of the war that had been fought and won inside this battered little house. But inside lived a miracle. A family broken by lies, repaired by loyalty, protected by a dog who never stopped believing in home, and a love that refused to die even when the world thought it already had. And that was the truth hiding in the darkness of that night. A German shepherd no one expected to return. A widow still living with the weight of her husband's memory and a mystery that changed everything. Sometimes life puts answers in the most impossible places, and sometimes the bravest heroes don't wear uniforms, they walk on 4 legs. If this unbelievable story touched your heart, make sure to hit the like button to support the channel. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another real-life inspired mystery like this one. Before you go, drop a comment below and tell us, Where are you watching from tonight? Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next story.